This episode is brought to you by Encore Business Group, Ericola Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Williams Chiropractic, Elite Winning Solutions, and Sal's Complete Home Painting and Handyman Services. Shayne Graham's Extra Points with Ron Walsh airs live Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Happy Blonde Brownie Day, I believe. I took that off my call sheet. That's the day we're celebrating today. But we're going to be celebrating a different day. Welcome into Jethro with a Twist. We are the Twist, I think. You heard Kickstart My Heart. We're officially the Twist on Jethro here, a classic country station. But we have a different thing to celebrate. I took my first show off on Monday. I was just talking about that with AA Ron, who's keeping us on track, and Mom and I are in studio here. And Shayne's on the road, but he'll be on the show at 8:30 here. But we wanted to start off hot. The biggest news really in football, even though we've got both sets of playoffs, one just concluded in college, and the NFL is down to the Final Four. I was actually at the Indiana final in Miami, enemy territory, great game, great storylines. I hooked up with this guy, Daniel Flick. He used to write for the Falcons. He also does some draft writing, so we'll be bringing him on for that too, because we'll be talking a lot of draft. But he is a fellow IU guy, IU alum. I used to write for the Indiana Daily Student, and now he's for IU and SI. And we're happy to have him on the show. He's going to summarize the game for us. How was the travel back from Florida for you here? We made it in and out, but kind of barely here. We had basically 24 hours of travel and 24 hours of a game day. How about you?
Yeah, it was smooth. I mean, I got in there Friday night. Plane got delayed a little bit because of some ice, but I got back pretty smooth probably Tuesday afternoon because we had a little winter's press conference that morning, and then flew back straight to Indy around 4:15ish. So that part was all smooth, man. It was a bit of a shock when you're flying out and it's like 60-ish degrees in Miami, Florida, and you land back in Bloomington at 20 degrees. So that was a bit of a culture shock, right? But it was all good, man.
I
really
get
fun
it.
Weekend.
Oh, definitely. And we're a little further north than you and close to the coast. So I get it for sure. But yeah, I want to get your, obviously your takes on a bunch of things, but I did see on IU on SI that you kind of went through the post the celebration part. So I'm curious what you took part in, what you said, the press conference, and then you kind of outlined what they were going to do back in Indiana. And then through my sports memorabilia circles, I saw that Fernando was doing a signing at a Dick's in Bloomington too. But take us through how the aftermath has gone here.
Yeah, it was, man, so I think the game went final a little bit before 11:20 p.m. that night. And then, they were on the field for, goodness, close to an hour afterwards with, a lot of songs being played, a lot of songs being sang around Hard Rock Stadium. Locker room opened for us around like 12:10, 12:20. But I mean, it was a party on the field, and there was a very big party within that locker room too. I mean, they were just smoking cigars and blasted music. And I mean, a lot of those guys called it like the greatest night a lot of them have, had alive. So it was kind of just trying to capture that, of trying to find a way to put into words so many incredible scenes, like a lot of guys, crying and hugging each other, and a lot of I love yous in that locker room too. Like, I mean, it was a very emotional night for a lot of those guys. So it was kind of trying to capture that. And then, we're up until the wee hours of the morning. I didn't sleep that night, so I went straight through. It's really funny, like when they had the winners press conference that morning, I was kind of like there physically, but mentally I was half awake in all transparency, because it had been about 30-ish hours since I'd slept probably 24 hours from the last time that I'd slept. So I was a little tired, but so it was cool. But and then a lot of it was just writing away, right? I mean, that morning also, like within 12 hours after the clock hit 0, you had Owings leave, you had a few guys hit the portal. Like, it was a really hectic morning. So I guess that's life with the modern calendar. But yeah, and then again, Fernando had his little signing last night. Omar Cooper and I think Kalen Black had a signing this afternoon at Academy Sports. So a lot of guys doing that. And then there's a big championship celebration, like party thing kind of happening in Memorial Stadium on Saturday afternoon. So that's when a lot of these guys kind of, have a chance to breathe a little bit and kind of remove themselves out of this big spotlight, right? But it's been crazy, man. It's been a lot of go ever since that clock hit zero at 11:20.
I get it, and we appreciate you coming on and taking the time. I'm sure you haven't kept up with your sleep here, because it's not only that part, but it's before in the run up to it. It's not like you got a break. You were writing constantly in this run up with the college football playoff and with how significant the season has been. But it makes me think. Obviously, Cignetti had a very that was one of the talking points for a lot of the national pundits, that he's got a certain way of handling things. He's very businesslike. He doesn't smile much on the sidelines, but it almost reminds me of when a kid goes off to college and they were a very sheltered kid. And it was like, okay, mom and dad were very much under control of the environment. And then they go off to college, they get a little freedom, and then all of a sudden it's party time. They're getting into all the scenes. That's what I imagine Indiana was like, because they were so focused along this whole journey. And then aside from, I could have almost seen Cignetti do the thing after Belichick won one of the Super Bowls. He said, well, on to Cleveland. It's like, no, it's not on to anything. You're done with the season. Just, celebrate this. Aside from that, you got to finally have a celebration, because you've been moving on week to week and focused on that next week, but now there's no next week to focus on. So it's nice that they did get that payoff, because if you lose, the season's over too, but you don't really get that payoff, and you don't get to truly celebrate what was still a great season, even if they went 15-1. So the fact that they were able to celebrate the 16-0, especially with how close it was at the end, had to be nice for the whole group to do together.
Yeah, it seemed, I think it was Aiden Fisher had said this when we had him. I think it was either Monday or Tuesday of that week, pregame. And he'd said that, like, for as great as this year has been, as historical as it has been in a lot of ways, that for them, it didn't really matter if they lost that game. So it was almost like for a team that's done so much and really redefined what this program is all about, if you lose that game, in their eyes, it's a very incomplete ending to a great Hollywood story, right? So, like, I feel like them winning it how they won it in a game that in a lot of ways embodied their whole year was a very fit ending for a magical team. So you definitely could tell a lot of guys were very relieved. I think that was kind of the common emotion that I got out of it was, it's like just absolutely ecstatic, yes, but also just very relieved, because I think there was a pressure element, a high stress level element. And again, like the party that they had after the game that they've had all week, that they'll have again on Saturday, really is like a culmination of a lot of parties that they chose not to have throughout the year, because they were very, very cognizant of the idea that the job was not done until they had that chance earlier this week in Miami Gardens. So that was kind of what they were locked in on the whole year, which is why I think more than a lot of other teams in the country, they were largely unbothered by the stakes of really big games, right? Because they never got blinded by it. They never got, wide-eyed and caught up in it, because for them it really was just one game at a time, one play at a time. And I think they were able to really compartmentalize that better than a lot of kids are. And it was really, really impressive. And again, I mean, I walked back by that locker room probably about 2 hours after I'd left it originally, and it still reeked of cigar smoke, man. So they lit it up in there for sure.
Oh, I imagine. And that's a key part of this team. I mean, look at how close that game was. They did need that superior focus because they needed it within the game. That Miami team was for real. They deserve a lot of credit. They were one of the teams that people were focusing on. Hey, maybe they shouldn't even be here in the college football playoff. They proved that was the case. Their storylines abound here because you had the whole Mendoza family growing up both of Fernando's parents went to Miami. They were both athletes at Miami. He was not recruited. He was a 2-star. He was asked to be a walk-on. Then he progressed, and they wanted him in the portal. And he talked about that afterwards, but he basically said no because, hey, you had a chance. I was right down the street. You had a chance to get me initially. Indiana was more heavily interested in him. I'm sure the package offer was good in NIL as well, but he believed in Cignetti, and that all worked. But yeah, there were so many different storylines, but that has to be one of the better ones of the whole game, because that part especially is a storybook, even in how you have to be kind of amazed, Daniel, and how he handles the press. I mean, I know these guys are a little bit older. I know the average age of the team is a little bit older, and that's what Cignetti is focused on, getting some of these older guys in there. But I mean, Mendoza is extremely polished for still what's a pretty young guy, even if he's older as far as college goes.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's also incredibly smart too, and I kind of think he's one of those guys also that he did an incredible job of not letting the Heisman stuff, really pull him away from the team or from the mission that all of them had prior to all of, even prior to week one. I mean, they were very intent on hey, we think we can win a chip, and as long as we're locked in, we really think this team has a shot at it. And so I think with Fernando, he kind of realized the chance that they had. I think he realized the Heisman was cool, but they still had larger aspirations than that. So he did an incredible job in that regard too. And it's funny because a lot of the Heismaners before him had kind of struggled. I think the number before this year was the last maybe 20-odd Heisman winners were right around 500 in postseason games after winning the Heisman. So a lot of them had really struggled with it, and he kind of just found a way to where it never really got to him. He was so steady, right? I mean, he didn't make any grave mistakes the entire playoff run, and whenever the moment rose, whenever he had to make the Heisman caliber plays, he always made them. Again, that's a large reason of why they won. Right, is if you look at that last quarter in Miami Gardens, he makes the play, and Carson Beck throws a pick. Right, that's kind of what it came down to. Is one quarterback on one side had arguably the greatest play in school history, and the other one had a back-breaking INT. So, again, that's kind of it. Really shows, I think, what Fernando, how he's wired. And again, there was never a moment with that team where they even began to sense that he left them behind. He was very much team-oriented, and really, even though he'd won the Heisman, even though he had all this, had all these eyes on him, all this Heisman pressure on him, he still handled it extremely well.
He showed that all the way through, the team focus, even at the end. I mean, he did let an F-bomb slip. But other than that, he kept everything. You could tell that was very authentic. And like you said, he's smart. I mean, he was posting in LinkedIn after the championship. He's got a bright future, football and beyond. But I want to pick up with that and kind of the storyline thing and some of the aftermath of the IU championship here. But we'll come back with Daniel Flick of IU on SI and discuss some more Hoosiers championship football, which is a phrase that I never thought I'd say. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Happy to come back here with Daniel Flick, the tired Daniel Flick, but he sounds good. We're talking IU and we're talking the championship. I wanted to go more into what you're talking about with the Mendoza thing, because we were talking about how it's a storyline. I mean, I imagine there will be a movie made out of this. I mean, there's a movie that's literally called Hoosiers, and this is a better storyline. No offense to Jimmy Chitwood and crew, but this is arguably a better storyline than that. The losingest football team in college football history. Not anymore, because Northwestern passed them, but he turns around and becomes the first really official 16-win team. Apologies to the 1893 Yale team or whatever, but they didn't play all college opponents. I'm not going to count that. But the fact that you have this quarterback with all those Miami ties, we were talking about all of that. But you mentioned the Heisman ceremony, and all I could think was, not only did you have a guy that won the Heisman, didn't lose focus, that's very rare. You talked about kind of the inverted relationship between winning the Heisman and then being able to stay focused and win the championship after that. Right. All I could think of, though, is Diego Pavia sitting next to him and the fact that he's out of central casting as the heel for the Heisman ceremony, because he was also a perfect juxtaposition to, oh, this is what it looks like when somebody's not handling this quite as graceful.
Yeah. And again, I'm sure Pavia was highly interesting to cover for all those guys in Nashville. But yeah, I think, again, like the way that Fernando, I'd heard this story, I think it was from Omar Cooper, said that when Fernando came in, like the Monday after winning the Heisman, he was extremely tired. Like I remember he talked to us, and I think he was kind of a tad sick and just looked really tired. But like he went around that whole team building that day, worked out with the team that morning, and then literally brought the Heisman to just about every person in the entire stadium. Like every person that worked for the team, every staff member, comms member, literally like pretty much everybody like got to see it, touch it, you know, like he wanted to make sure that people realized that he understood that the award was, that he didn't win it on his own. And that's kind of the one thing that Cignetti tried to preach to him throughout the whole process, is like, this is not an individual award. Like your name might be on it, you might get the praise for it, but all these other people have helped you reach this point, have helped put this structure in place around you, have helped catch all your passes, have helped block for you, have helped run to where you have more chances to throw the ball against lighter boxes. Like, I mean, it's super interesting. I think he understood that very early on, and I think that's, again, a nod to not only him, but the staff that's around him, and the way that he's able to kind of take their word, hear their word, and treat it like it's the gospel, right? Like he doesn't just hear things and block them out because he's the Heisman winner. He hears them, and when it's coaches, when it's the people who are there to help him, he listens to it. He wants their help. He wants to transfer what they're telling him and become better. So, again, I think it's just a nod to him. And again, he's handled it all great. Like a lot of guys said that there was never really any doubt in their mind that he would struggle with the Heisman hype and all that stuff after he'd won it, just because of how he's wired and who he is as a guy.
Exactly. And not to get too far ahead of myself, but we're going to be focusing on the draft on the show, and you're one of the mock draft experts on SI. I mean, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion, unless something goes wrong, that he's going to be drafted first overall. And what a guy to be paired with Tom Brady with the Raiders there. That's going to be really interesting if that's ends up being the pairing, because I don't know if I can foresee a better pairing than those two, and him having direct access to a mind like that, Brady having vested interest in him, and then seeing where that goes, because that like you said, he was very malleable. He came over from another program. He could have been set in his ways. He could have said, hey, I'm the big-time transfer quarterback. I'm not worried about what you have to say, coach. But he obviously was not that, and now his future looks very bright, especially if that's going to be his mentor in the NFL.
Oh, yeah. It's also, I think, for him a dream come true, because, he is a Miami product, but he grew up idolizing Tom Brady. Like, Tom Brady was his guy. When he was in the backyard and him and Alberto were playing one-on-ones against each other, it was usually Patriots and Dolphins. So, Fernando legitimately grew up like loving Tom Brady. Like that was his guy. And so, I think Fernando would be over the moon to have a guy like that in his corner, and I think he'd do a really good job with it all too. So, I'm kind of excited to see where that leads him. But I definitely think that the Raiders, among all places for him to have the mentorship that he could have, would be phenomenal for him.
Exactly. It's an amazing story, and that's kind of the culmination of it. And then it'll be interesting to see what he does at that level, because they're not a team that's obviously got a lot going right now, but with him in the fray, Brady leading it a little bit, new coaching, new blood in there, it could be an interesting team all of a sudden, kind of like IU was. But the IU machine keeps moving too, because I mean, like you said, this got to be tough to cover. I do have empathy for you with the process, because I've talked about this on the show, how this has got to be amended at some point, how all these things overlap. There's just too many things that overlap. The transfer portal's open, but teams are still playing. You got coach movement, and then that really impacts the process. Now, thankfully the Indiana coaches are kind of locked in, maybe not down the line, but now you've got some of that movement that'll happen. You've got draft decisions that have to be made. It all happens too quick. There's got to be a timeline that can help both the players and coaches and organizations, but also the writers and the people that depend on the coverage here. But it's amazing that you have to then go, okay, let's see, is Pons going to the draft? Is Carter Smith going to the draft? Like then you've got to cover all of that stuff and the transfer portal, but they're looking very good in the transfer portal. I don't know how they're doing it because I do as far as their success, but they've had a lot to focus on, but they still were able to get guys like Nick Marsh and Josh Hoover in the portal here.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the staff views it the exact same way that I do. That it's a blessing to have a team to cover this late into the year, and I think a lot of them really appreciated that aspect of it. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but I don't think they'd want it any other way. And I know I wouldn't want it that way either. I love the way it's been. It's been an awesome ride. But yeah, they had to sacrifice a good amount of prep, around 10 hours of prep, going to the Oregon game when they were hosting a lot of guys on campus. What did Sig say? I think Sig said they had about 13 guys on campus either Saturday or Sunday, the week leading into the Friday night Oregon game in Atlanta. So it was a lot of long hours and a lot of, I think, brain power that they had to put towards recruiting guys in the portal that I don't think I don't think they enjoyed that in the slightest. I think Sig kind of heaved voice that he was not thrilled with it. And again, it's a hard topic, right? I mean, I think they need to find a way to end the season either on or before January 1st, whether that's having to move the whole school calendar up a few weeks or however they want it to look. There's a lot of options there, but I mean, it's tough on the teams. It's a hard deal for those who are actually winning and who are in the playoffs and who have to handle all that stuff. It is not their advantage in the slightest, right? So I was amused at how well they were able to handle all of it. I definitely think it helped them that they're now 27-2 the last 2 years. I think a lot of people want to be a part of a team like that. So I think that absolutely helps their cause. But yeah, I mean, it's a very strong class they got coming in now. I think it's probably still ranked the top, transfer class. So they got a lot of good pieces. And if you look at it, I think they should have the pieces that they need to try to run it back or at least get close to that height again in 2026. Because again, it's a really talented group and obviously a staff that knows what it's doing for sure.
Exactly. And there are guys that are going to leave. That's going to be natural. I mean, Pons certainly seems to be NFL draft ready. I saw you had an article about him declaring. I wasn't surprised about that. I was surprised that Smith decided to come back though. But there's going to be people that leave. I was a little disappointed that Alberto left though. That was who I wanted to stay. And I have a buddy that his 13-year-old is irrationally an Alberto Mendoza fan. He wanted him to start over Fernando the entire time. He didn't care that he won the Heisman. He didn't care about any of that stuff. So he's going to be very disappointed. But I would have liked to have seen what he would have done in an IU uniform. I get it. I get that that's the name of the game, especially with bringing in Hoover. But it would have been nice to have more years of Mendoza here.
Yeah, again, he's a very talented young player too, and well liked by everyone, within that locker room. Like there was a lot of Alberto Mendoza fans in that locker room. Probably not as big of a fan as your friend's son there, it would seem, but I think he'll be fine. He's got an extremely bright future ahead of him. Strong arm, very athletic. I think it's underrated how athletic he is. So I'll be curious to watch him play next year. I would assume he'll start at Georgia Tech, and I think he'll do a good job there. That's a program that obviously had a really good year this year too. So looking forward to that for his sake. And it was always going to be a struggle, right? Because when you're Indiana and you've had the success that this staff has had with QBs, you can go out and get just about anybody you want to. And so when you constantly have these highly ranked QBs and really elite QBs who hit the portal, it's a little bit hard, I think, for staffs to invest in guys like any backup pretty much within your team when they're not starting and you're not seeing them against high level dudes each and every week. I think the natural inclination is to lean towards guys like Josh Hoover, like Fernando last year. When you've seen them start, you've seen them produce, you've seen them play well at a high level against good teams. So I think Alberto will be fine. I just think that the staff kind of reached that same conclusion that, hey, we can get any guy we want to. We're going to be a hot slot for any, transfer quarterback. We're going to try to capitalize on that. So I think it's a logical. This, unfortunately, is probably a logical end for the way that saga was always kind of heading toward. But again, I think it's a win-win for each as well, because I think Indiana has a great QB in Hoover for next year, and I think Alberto will be just fine.
You make a great point about the fact that you get to see them play. Obviously, they saw Alberto in practice and in the building, and I'm sure they felt very strongly about him. But it's different that the guy's already developed some traits, and then you can kind of put him up a level. But yeah, if I'm a quarterback, I'm going to Indiana. It's not because I'm tied to there. It's just seeing what Cignetti's done with quarterbacks, not only Mendoza and then Rourke before him. That was a pretty big jump, but the guys at James Madison too. So, but interesting stuff. We enjoy you coming on the show. We'll look forward to hopefully having you back on as the draft kicks up, because we'll be doing a lot of draft coverage. So I'd like to get your takes on the draft as a whole, Indiana players in the draft, your mock draft, because you do one for SI. And I want to make sure to direct people to your coverage, whether it's on SI or elsewhere here, so they can follow you in the meantime.
Yes, sir. All my IU articles are online at si.com/college/Indiana. I'm on X as well. So, man, happy to join the show anytime. Really appreciate you, man.
Definitely. I hope you get some rest, and we'll look forward to having you back on the show soon here.
Yes, sir. Sounds good. Appreciate you.
All right. Take care. Thanks to Daniel Flick. We appreciate him coming on. Good stuff. I have avoided doing the Indiana stuff mainly because I didn't want to be too self-indulgent, but it's become one of the best stories really of the football season. So it's nice that we can get some coverage there. And then, he'll be a good one to have in the mix for the draft season here that will be basically upon us now, because everybody's doing mock drafts and getting to that now as people are declaring. But we're going to switch our attention to somebody that is doing some mock drafts here, Jace Sweet of Michigan Football Media. He's going to take us through the Lions offseason, the new OC hire, and then maybe what he sees kind of with the offseason plan. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Happy to bring this next guest on. He has a lot of great coverage of the football scene, the Michigan football scene as a whole, and he's a good one to cover the Lions and Michigan Wolverines, all of that stuff. But we'll be focusing on the Lions today. This is Jace Sweet. He's going to be talking to us about his offseason plan. I'm curious to hear his perspective, but we'll probably start in the obvious place here, Jace. When we were talking about your appearance on the show, this had not been locked in. We were going to talk about the offensive coordinator search, but the offensive coordinator search is completed, and now I often kind of rail against some of the stuff on social media. I try not to take part. I don't really respond to a lot of stuff or get on social media. I mainly use it for show promotion and partnering up with people and all of that stuff. But are you surprised by the backlash of this hiring, and what do you think of the hiring more importantly?
Well, first thing, of course, thanks for having me as always.
Definitely.
And then going on to the offensive coordinator hiring, I'm not ever surprised anymore with what I see on social media or hear from Lions fans at all, just simply because with how this season went, I talked about it pretty much every week on our show. Like, our fan base, I don't know what it is, but we do a great job of complaining. So it doesn't really I don't think it matters too much of what we do outside of win a Super Bowl. Somebody will be upset. So with that being said, I was also somewhat surprised by the hiring. It wasn't a name that I necessarily had in, my short list or anything. But once it happened, I do my research, and I like it. I don't love it yet, but I do like it. I think he did a good job with what he had over there in Arizona. Especially his run game over the years. He's done a really good job over there with that. In 2024, the Cardinals had the third most rushing yards in team history and the highest since 1979. So I think he did some things, some very positive things over there. My only real gripe, is Marvin Harrison Jr.'s usage, but I think that's more on the player than I would say the offensive coordinator, because I think we've all seen those clips throughout the season of him dropping wide open passes. So I like it, but I don't love it simply because it's not Mike McDaniel. It's not the Brian Dable. It's not the name that we wanted. But I'm also going to reserve judgment because I do think he's going to do a good job. Campbell and Holmes, I think they look at it like we didn't want to reinvent the offense. We just want somebody that can come in and run what we already have. So bringing in a Mike McDaniel or a Dable, I think you're changing the offense, whereas now we get a guy from that same scheme tree, I guess you can say.
I'm with you on that. And the McDaniel thing, we've talked about it on the show a decent amount, and I've been telling people I was kind of making a joke out of it a little bit, but I actually was not for. I get why people would be. He was a successful offensive coordinator. The coach, the head coaching thing was a little bit in disarray, but that was part Miami, and there was a lot of things going on there. I'm not too worried about that. But for me, it was the culture fit with him and Campbell. Campbell's comments, and he's always careful. He's authentic, but he's careful in how he frames things. He knows everything's going to be quoted. And he basically said, hey, I liked him in the interview. I just didn't think it was a good fit. And that's kind of how I felt about McDaniel. I know he's the bigger name, but the thing that worried me too, because you got that part that I wasn't 100% sure if he fit. I kind of looked at this as kind of darned if you do, darned if you don't. If he fits, then great. Okay, great hire. Well, he's gone in a year or two probably because he's then going to get hired as a head coach again. If he doesn't fit with Campbell, then it's going to flame out and you got to start over again. So either way, I saw them starting over again in a year or two, and potentially the same with Dable. I could see him being a guy that becomes a quote unquote retread where he's rehired if he's successful here. Now, you don't want to hold somebody down or not hire somebody because their success may lead to them getting hired, because that obviously happened with Johnson, even though he had a bigger kind of learning curve and a bigger curve kind of like Petzing is going to have as far as from his reputation now to where it got to at the end. But that's one of the things that's interesting about the Petzing hire as a whole is his connection to Johnson. You outlined it well on X, talking about his connections to a lot of other coaches. That's the kind of thing that makes me feel a bit better, especially combined with the fact that, hey, McDaniel had a lot of weapons and a lot of options with the Dolphins. And yes, there were some injuries. Yes, there were some issues, but that didn't go great. With the fact, with what Petzing dealt with when he was an offensive coordinator, doing what he did with it is maybe the largest improvement of some of the people that we've seen as an offensive coordinator. The only one that I can think of as competitive, which was the guy that I wanted, is Mike Kafka of the Giants. When he took over, that he was working with a lot of backups, and he did pretty well with those backups, as we saw when they played the Lions.
Yeah, and honestly, Kafka was on my short list for sure. I loved what he did against us specifically. I mean, and I really liked, Dan Campbell looking at guys who, whooped on us a little bit to come in and kind of breathe some, a breath of fresh air into the team. But, on the Petzing front, for me, like he's been in a couple different places, and he's always been relatively successful. I mean, if you can even look back to, when he was in Minnesota, he was a wide receivers coach in 2019, and Stephon Diggs had a career high receiving yards. And then with Kirk Cousins in 2018, Cousins set a QB record for the team with 425 completions and threw for the third most passing yards in the NFL and had the second highest completion percentage. So, and like you mentioned, going back to, Arizona, he had guys like Jacoby Brissett playing quarterback, Josh Dobbs playing quarterback, and Kyler Murray, who, of course, has not quite panned out after the Cliff Kingsbury situation. So I do feel like, like you mentioned, Petzing is one of those guys that got a lot out of what he had, and I talked about it on our show this past week. James Conner, had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons, and he had never had 1,000 yards before. So, he's getting the best out of guys who, for lack of a better term, are kind of journeymen, when we talk about like a Michael Wilson as a wide receiver as well. He's kind of a wide receiver 2, probably even 3 on a really good team, but he had 1,000 receiving yards, and had his best career year this past season. So I like that. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what he's going to be able to get out of having some real weapons and a real quarterback, because if he can do those things with them, it's definitely exciting to think about what he can unlock over here.
Exactly. You bring up Connor, and same thing with the tight end there, McBride. I mean, I'm sure those things were pluses in Campbell's camp as far as what he was able to do with the weapons that he did have. Yeah, I'm not as concerned with the Harrison thing either. I get that kind of showing up on the film and stuff, but like you said, there's kind of a couple different things going on there, I think. But it's almost like, I know you're a big movie guy. I follow you on X, so I know you watch. I think you do a movie of the day and all of that, but it almost reminds me of the fact I'm a big action movie guy. I like the old kind of B movie action movies with Stallone and Schwarzenegger. Not exactly masterpieces, most of them, but I like those types of movies. And when a movie is very highly rated and getting a lot of publicity and the Academy's looking at it, I usually go, nah, I'm out. I can't. I don't think I'm going to like this. To that end, one of the last movies I saw in the theater was The Substance. I don't know if you saw that, but it was a wild movie that is probably one of my least favorite that I've ever seen. That's kind of what I think of when I see this Petzing move. Everybody panning it. I'm kind of like, I think I'm into it now. I think this is like a Dolph Lundgren movie from the 80s here. I think I'm into it.
Yeah, for sure. And to that same point, hopefully it's going to be very entertaining on the field. And I think it will be. So, great parallel there to the, movie business. And I definitely agree with you. It's one of those things that, kind of going back to our first conversation point with Lions fans, honestly, like when Lions fans hate something, it makes me want to look into it more and figure out why I can like it, because generally, and I know a lot of people are going to hate that I say this, but we seem to be wrong a lot of the time. I mean, even going back to the draft when we drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell and Sam Laporta and Brian Branch. Branch was the only one Lions fans really liked out of the bunch. And I know everybody's going to look back and say, oh, we all loved it, but I think everybody was at least surprised. And I know most Lions fans hated the Jahmyr Gibbs pick. So that's just, leave it there, I guess.
Exactly. Well, and that's one thing, because to take it to a broader point, because that's very abstract to say, oh, well, when you like a movie that other people don't like, that there's nothing informational about that. But the Lions are good at finding value where other people don't necessarily attribute value. Sometimes that's with a player that's somewhat undervalued in some way, and then they're able to pull them from the draft or from free agency. There's plenty of examples in the Holmes-Campbell era, but they've been able to do this in kind of all facets of the game, and they've got to get back to that if they're gonna get back to a lengthy playoff run and to the aforementioned Super Bowl. They're gonna have to find value where other people don't, because it's not necessarily going to be in a Mike McDaniel. Just like when they're going to the open free agency market here and in the draft, if you get a guy that's, sure, it's nice to have a high pick and it's nice to get a guy that's highly touted in free agency, but you're going to have to pay for that. You're going to have to pay in assets in the draft, assets in free agency. It's kind of the same way for a coach. If it's a highly coveted guy, that comes with maybe some personality issues, that comes with the fact that maybe he'll leave sooner, like I mentioned earlier. So I like that they're identifying, hey, we're looking at this as kind of more of a Ben Johnson kind of thing. We can groom him into what we want him to be as a coach. He's a younger guy. He can grow with the team here. He's got a lot of weapons, as you mentioned, and then we'll try to put some players around him and find some values in the free agency market and in the draft, because I know you're with me on this. I'm always preaching against, like, okay, sure, it would be great to have Myles Garrett on this team. Every team in the league would love to have Myles Garrett, but that comes with a contract, that comes with a huge amount of your budget, and so you got to find values somewhere, and that's what I think this offseason is going to be about to a degree, both in the restructuring end of the contracts and then the coaches and players that they acquire.
Yeah, and when we look at this off season, in my opinion, it's going to be one of those. I think again, where like you mentioned, the Lions seem to find value in players that a lot of people don't. I keep hearing, Tyler Linderbaum, his name gets thrown around all the time, and I just don't think the Lions are going to really go after him that aggressively. Honestly, I would love it. But I think he's going to command a ton of money. And even if Decker decides to retire and, we get that $20 million back, that's just something I don't necessarily see happening. But a player that I think a lot of people aren't talking about enough is a guy like Cade Mays from Carolina. Now, he's not, an elite center like a Frank Ragnow or anything like that. But I do think we could get him for a, relatively cheap, price, probably like 10 to 12 million a year. But compared to Linderbaum, who I think he's going to get something like 25 million a year from the Chargers because, they desperately need a center and they have all the money in the world. The Lions, unfortunately, don't. So kind of to your point, that's an example of, this offseason, a lot of people might think we're going to go one way and then we pivot, and it actually would work out well, I think, in that scenario.
Exactly. I want to talk about that more in the second segment here because I think that's where they're going to have to kind of reclaim their glory a bit. And you mentioned it, but some of the things that they've done where people have kind of questioned it, it's ended up going pretty well. So I think you should probably reserve the questions, kind of like we're saying, hey, we got to see how this pans out. But I want to talk more about the player movement here in the second segment. We'll come back with Jace Sweet of the Michigan Football Network after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Jace Sweet of Michigan Football Network and talking about the Lions and the offseason plan. We're normally on the same page with a lot of this stuff, Jace, and I definitely hear what you're saying. I like that. I think that's the level that we're going to have to go to with a lot of this stuff, where you say, okay, let's cut out the Linderbaums. If you're talking centers, let's cut off the Linderbaums and the McGoverns of the world. Yes, we know they're good. Are their teams going to be able to retain them? That might be part of this. Or is somebody else going to overpay? Either way, I don't think you really want them on the Lions for that price tag. It's not that you don't want the player, you don't want the price tag and the value. One suggestion, I like that suggestion of the Carolina center, but one suggestion that I found interesting too is Mike Payton of A to Z Sports, who's been on the show, brought up the idea that the Cardinals might be cutting some salary, and that their center Froholt might hit the market, and if he does, you got to think that maybe Petzing would have some interest in his former center too. So you got to wait for some of the movement to kind of happen too, because not only do you have the draft coming, but you got cuts coming, and there's going to be some guys that are going to be on the market in March that aren't on the market right now.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great example with Froholt, because I thought that same thing too, but I was thinking more of a trade, like, send them a 7th-round pick or something for him. He is only on a 1-year deal, though, so, I mean, if they decide to cut him, that'd probably work out better for us. We can save capital, probably save some money, and get him on a little bit longer deal. So I definitely like that idea, and that's kind of where I'm at. With the Lions, with where the Lions are right now, money-wise, structure-wise, talent-wise, and just in terms of contending, they got to be smart, and they got to kind of play the system a little bit right now. Brad Holmes is going to really need to hit on a couple of these draft picks. Obviously, we don't have a 3rd-round pick this year, so that doesn't help. But, moving around money, like we talked about Taylor Decker possibly retiring, that's going to throw another wrench into this conversation because, we know the offensive line is already an issue, and losing your bookend left tackle is never a good thing. And it's not going to be easy to, replace him. Thankfully, we have a top, 20 pick this year in the draft. So there's potential we could grab a tackle there. But even then, I'm not too, certain that one is going to be available that we really want. So like I said, it's going to be some gymnastics this offseason, to make this work. So the Froholt idea, I definitely like that. And honestly, if that was the case, I think I'd prefer that, because he's used to a similar type of, offense with Petzing, and, he'd be a little bit cheaper. He is a little bit on the older side, but not quite ready for retirement yet. So we'd get a couple years out of him.
And I think that's what you're going to need to balance here with this, is finding some value veterans that kind of buy you a little bit of time. Because like you said, I'm of the of the inclination that I don't think Decker is going to be back. I don't know if it's retirement. I don't know if it's buyout. I don't know if it's kind of a mutual thing, but all the things that I'm seeing and reading and seeing out of Decker's camp and just in general, it just seems to make the most sense. Now, obviously that's going to leave a big hole, and then that kind of leaves that whole side, including the center of the offensive line, in question a bit. So you're going to have to get some veterans because your offensive line is very young. There's some good prospects on there. Obviously, you got Sewell as the holdover, one of the best offensive linemen in the league, but everybody else is a little bit on the younger side. You're going to have to balance that and probably work in some veterans because I think we learned this year or in the last couple years that with the Jonah Jackson thing and whoever was in between, the center, since they had classic bookend tackles that were very good in Decker and Sewell once they got Sewell, and then Ragnow in the middle, it was like, well, we can get away with something a little bit at the guards because they've been bookended and surrounded by these other players. Now, if you've got a young line, yes, they'll be able to grow together, but it'd be nice to have, like you said, somebody that knows the system a little bit better, especially if you have to take Decker out of the mix, because now you're probably spending that first round pick if you're going to try to replace him directly on hopefully like a Fano or somebody like that. I noticed so I saw one of your colleagues at Michigan Football Network has a mock draft. I would be elated if they ended up with the players in that mock draft and you guys started with Fano, who may or may not be there at 17. But if it falls that way and they're able to get those players at those slots, I'm all in, including Drew Aller late. But that would, I like the way that went. That marries up with a lot of the mock drafts that I've been doing. But yeah, you're going to have to kind of pick your resources accordingly, both in spending in the open market and then the limited draft picks without the third rounder in there, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I like your point about veterans, because I completely agree. We definitely need to add some veteran starters to this roster, regardless of what happens this offseason. But kind of with the gymnastics conversation, I think Miles Frazier has some potential to play left tackle for us, because he started, I think, 12 games at left tackle and then 2 or 3 at right tackle at LSU. Obviously he's probably more of a guard in the NFL, but he's built like a tackle in a lot of ways. I mean, he's 6'6", 325 pounds. He's got 33-inch arms. That's essentially Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell is 6'5", 335 with 33 and I think 3/4 inch arms. So he's only got, a 1/4 inch of an arm length on the guy. So I don't think it'd be that crazy to put Frazier there. And then really we only have to add a center. However, I do think there needs to be a conversation had about Mahogany. I know a lot of people are kind of, writing him into our starting lineup at left guard, but I genuinely do think we were better with Frazier in there a lot of the time. So that might be a conversation to be had there as well. So it's going to take a lot of movement. And, on the mock draft conversation, I personally try to stay away from doing too many mock drafts at this point in the season, just because I get myself too excited. Kind of like what you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of mock drafts right now that, seem awesome. And I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that a lot of these mock draft websites haven't necessarily updated their board completely yet. So I like to wait until, I would say like March-ish to start doing a lot of them, because that's when they're, I think, the best in terms of how the board falls. But it's always fun, nonetheless. But personally, it's hard for me to live off of hypotheticals,
Exactly. And I'm totally with you. I know when I do a mock draft, and especially if you kind of know about the prospects, you study the prospects more than I do, but you know about the prospects, you know about the board a little bit. You just end up taking players that are just undervalued at this point in time. They're valued at a third round or a third day grade, day 3 grade, and then they end up in like the second round, and you're taking them in the 5th, 6th, 7th round going, hey, this is a great pick. Yeah, but you're not going to be able to take that on draft day, to your point. But I know we focused on the offensive line, but I think it is the biggest need. There's a lot of focus on that defensive end, and they're going to have to shore up that other side opposite Hutchinson. But I'm glad you brought up Mahogany, because that's where I was going too, because their focus is inherently going to be on the left tackle if Decker's gone, and then obviously the center. But a Mahogany, between the injuries and the fact that this brief time this year didn't quite look like last year, I don't know if you can be as confident unless you really bookend him very nicely. I'm glad you referenced the Frazier thing too, because I've been reading that out of a lot of folks. Jeff Risden's mentioned it, a few others, talking about, hey, this right tackle may be his most natural position. He may end up settling into that if they want to move Sewell over. So at least you have some flexibility there. I think they have some good pieces as far as young linemen go on this team. You just got to reinforce it both with depth, especially with Skipper now retiring, the news coming out here recently. You don't have that backup tackle. So you've got to get some depth, and you've got to get some quality starters that are a better five-man unit than last year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think at the end of the day, regardless of what happens with Decker, we really, really have to go hard after the center position, because I think that was the obvious, issue this year was Glasgow at center. And I think Glasgow is not going to retire. I think he's going to stay around for another year, but I'm not so sure we're going to keep him at his current price tag, because I think if he comes back, he'll be a backup. But like I said, at the end of the day, I think center is the position that we have to add, because like I said, with Frazier and Mahogany and Ratledge and all these other guys, there's a lot of versatility there. So, we could kind of swap things around, or, just add a guy in free agency at center and then draft our tackle in the first round and move on. Because, Brad Holmes has mentioned it very, very often this offseason that he is going to be very aggressive when it comes to the offensive line. And then your point about the defensive line, I'm one of those that has been, we need to take an edge in the first round the last 2 years. I was feeling that way coming into this season as well. But with the Decker stuff, I'm kind of falling back on that a little bit. However, I still think we need to draft an edge high, because I think we have, and I'm going to call it a gimmick because it kind of feels gimmicky a little bit at this point. We have this weird gimmick where the Lions decided that Aiden Hutchinson is the only edge rusher that we need. And I think that if we don't change that way of thinking, we're going to be very, very sorry in a few years when we end up not winning a Super Bowl and wondering why. And Al-Qadim Muhammad had a great year this year, 11.5 sacks. But let's be real, he's been a journeyman his entire career. He's 31 years old. He's probably not coming back because he's going to get paid pretty well. And that was his best season. And I'm going to say there's no question as to why it was his best season, because he has Aiden Hutchinson, Ali McNeil, DJ Reader, and Tyleek Williams next to him. So even if we get a guy, I know we don't have a third-round pick, but if we can get a third-round value edge, I think even then, we're taking a big step up on the defensive side of the ball. And then, of course, there's a conversation to be had about corner and safety with the Kirby and Branch stuff, and, even linebacker, depending on where we're talking. But I think those are the edge and tackle and center are definitely our biggest needs going into the offseason.
I agree, especially on the second round kind of slotting or beyond the first round, because you talked about it being a gimmick. I thought you were going to go a different direction. You're right about that part, the Hutchinson part, but I thought about kind of how they view that other side. They don't necessarily, they're not even searching for that premier defensive end opposite him. They're looking for somebody that can kind of crush the can a little bit, as that phrase got popular. We watched Reuben Bain in the college football playoff final. I was there at the game and very impressed by him and Misador. Bain's going to come off the board very high, obviously much higher than their first pick, I believe. But that type of guy that's going to be a premier guy, I don't know if they're even in the market for him, for that kind of guy to a degree, because we talked about this before last year's draft. There was a lot of depth from that defensive end position, and they just didn't go for it. So hopefully that means that maybe in that second round, that one of those heavy end types that is more focused on the run defense approach and kind of keeping everything contained, like an Overton. There's a few of them in that range, but maybe somebody like that is who they end up with. But we'll definitely have you back on to talk more draft as it approaches, because like you said, it gets more salient as it comes into fruition here closer to the draft, March, obviously February too, but February, March, and then April approaching the actual draft. So we'll have you on as we get more information and through the draft process. Are you going to be participating in some of the pre-draft process? I know you were trying to go to the Senior Bowl last year, but because of health reasons that didn't work. But are you going to try to do some pre-draft stuff this year?
Yeah, we got, media credentials again for the Senior Bowl this year, but again, I'm not going to be able to make it, unfortunately, this time for scheduling issues. But they are doing for the Shrine Bowl, they're doing something pretty cool this year, which is, what are they calling it? Virtual credentials, to where, they're going to let you get, they're going to have practice cameras set up so you can basically be there. So I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to that. And obviously paying a lot of attention to the Senior Bowl as well as, the tweets come out and things like that. But, we're getting to the most exciting part of the year for a lot of us, which is draft season and free agency. So it's, starting to heat up a little bit.
Especially with this off season pending with the Lions here. But yeah, I'm happy you could come on the show. Be sure to plug where they can follow you here, both with the podcast, YouTube, and the website as well.
Yeah, and of course, thanks for having me. You can find me at Jace Sweet on all social medias, or at MIFB Network on X, Michigan Football Network on Instagram and Facebook and all that. We are also live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. on YouTube and Twitch at Michigan Football Network. And excuse me. And you can find us at MichiganFootballNetwork.com, which is where we post all of our, articles leading up to the draft and during the season and all that. So once again, I appreciate you for having me, and I look forward to being on again. Definitely.
We'll have you back and appreciate you coming on. Great stuff as usual. And we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks, Jace. Thanks to Jace Sweet of Michigan Football Network. Good stuff there. Be sure to follow him. We're going to continue our interview series here, the declassified interview series with Javin Hunter. He was former NFL player. He's also the father of Jaden Ivey of the Pistons and son of James Hunter of Lions fame. So depending on what generation you are, you know one of those guys probably. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM.
From the Scully Statewide Moving Studios in Granville.
Country with a twist. Jethro FM, 1530 AM, WYGR, Wyoming, Grand Rapids, 94.9 FM, Grand Rapids, 99.5 FM, Lowell, and Jethro South, 980 AM, WAKV Otsego, Plainwell, 98.9 FM Otsego, and 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
Happy to bring on this next guest. He's been on my Sports Intel show a few times here to cover different things for us. He was a former Ravens player. He's also now, we'll have to ask him how he feels about this, because I know he's very proud of his sons. That's plural, but he's now, I hate to introduce him as the father of Jaden Ivey, because he's got a great athletic career himself, but we're going to do a bit of a profile on him here. But friend of the show, Javin Hunter, welcome on.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely excited about this because you've got a really interesting history. And I remember hearing, I think I actually first heard your name when you were a lot younger, because there's, like I said, there's some connections here. You probably feel like you're known more for who you're the son of or who you're the father of, depending on what generation of person you're talking to here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I get a lot of people that remember my father, playing for the Lions, and a lot of people, have nostalgia for those 80s teams, even though they didn't win many games. They still have nostalgia for those 80s teams, and so he played on that team. And then, obviously, Jaden getting drafted here, and me being from here, a lot of people keep up with him and how he's doing and how I'm doing, so I really appreciate that.
We haven't talked a lot about your youth. I'm curious how it was growing up as James Hunter's son and how that kind of affected you. Obviously, being in football was a lot different when he was in football versus when you were in football and all of those kinds of things. But how did that affect your upbringing, being the son of a well-known football player at that time?
Oh, that's a great question. So, my dad really motivated me. So, just learning about him, guys used to come up to me and, guys, his peers used to come up to me and tell me how good he was, how athletic he was, how fast he was. And so, I always had the mindset, well, I'm going to be better than him, so he always motivated me to want to, achieve and play sports. And, he wouldn't let me play football until ninth grade, but he put me in soccer. So I played a lot of soccer growing up, and then obviously played a lot of basketball. Started playing basketball in second grade. But, my father, he was a great, great father, very active, and, really just motivated me to want to be a professional athlete.
You can't really suppress that competitive spirit that exists at a lot of levels. But I'm curious why so obviously you were a very good basketball player growing up. Why did you start kind of more with basketball, being the son of a football player? And then at what point did you say, okay, I'm going to focus more on football? Because I said I've known your name for a while. It's because you were on those great Detroit Country Day teams back in the day with a lot of big names, including your own. And those were fantastic teams. I was on the west side of the state, a little bit younger than you guys, but we were following those teams even on the west side here because they were the hottest thing going at that time.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, we had some good teams. Obviously, Shayne Graham was ahead of the stake. I think, many people might remember him playing at Duke and playing in the NBA for 13 or so seasons and winning a championship, and then obviously National Player of the Year at Duke. And then David Weber, who was the MAC Player of the Year at Central Michigan, also the brother of Chris Weber. So, we had some great teams, and that was fun. Really enjoyed my time playing basketball. But, to answer your question, my father wouldn't let me play until ninth grade. So I begged him. From the age of probably 10, 11, 12, I begged him to play. He wouldn't let me play, continue with soccer, continue with basketball. And he always said, when I get to high school, that would be enough football for you. And he, and he was probably right. I actually have the same mindset. I like kids to play. I had my sons play, Jaden and Jordan play flag football. I didn't let them have the contact until they got a little older and was able to kind of withstand the hit. But I got recruited a lot heavier in football than basketball. I had some Division I offers. I think I had Tennessee, I had Syracuse, Minnesota. I had some D1 offers, but I was a first team All-American in football, so it just and me being 6 foot, it just looked like it'd be a little easier for me to, try to make a professional career out of football with my dimensions. So that's kind of why I chose football.
Interesting. Well, clearly your dad knew that you were trying to be competitive with him and said, hey, I don't want him to play football. I don't want him to be better than me here. I'm going to start him a little later. I'm going to start him behind the eight ball. No, it makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of parents are dealing with this nowadays where, I mean, you played football. You're part of the NFLPA system now and all of that stuff. I mean, there is a lot of studying and things and information that we're getting about how the post-career goes for you guys. There's a lot of mileage on your bodies. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of the concussion stuff, but it's not just the hits to the head. It's the mileage that goes on the body. And some of the parents nowadays are going, I'm not sure if I want my kid to sign up for this. It'd be great for them to be a professional football player and everything that comes with that. But what does that post-career look like, as opposed to other sports where you can kind of be done playing basketball and you might have some issues with some of your joints or something, but you usually can have a healthy career after that.
Right. I mean, it's a grind on both sides of the fence, I guess you could say. Physically playing the game, we say in football you're going to get hurt, but it's 100% hurt rate, but you want to try not to get injured. And, you're going to get hurt. You're going to have aches and pains just playing the game. But you don't want to, you hope you don't have any serious injuries. And then, when you're fortunate to play the game and then you retire, it's a challenge, it's a grind to try to figure out what you want to do and kind of move on with your life and leave the game, that you've been playing for so long, leave that behind and move on. So, I'm part of the NFLPA and the trust, and so we help. Our mission is to help, former players transition away from the NFL, and so I'm very passionate about helping guys move forward. I was able to go back to school and obtain my master's degree, and I worked, corporate jobs, corporate leadership roles upon leaving the NFL, and so. I try to, just be a soundboard for guys and impart any wisdom I can to help them move forward and, get on the other side of the game.
I was going to talk about that a little bit later because that part it kind of going in timeline order, but that's a good thing to cover now. I'm curious about kind of that transition from. That's always an interesting part. That's one of the reasons I like doing this interview series, because you guys, yes, there is mileage on the body and injury issues and all of that, but it's a weird field as far as a career goes, where you're basically forced into retirement by. It depends on the player, and I guess if you're Tom Brady, you're never really forced into retirement. You just keep playing and all of that. But for the most part, it's hard to play past 40. Usually, it's at some point in your 30s if you have a decently long career, and then you hopefully have a long life ahead of you at that point. And then you kind of have to go, okay, I'm used to being the top 1/10 of 1% of my field, and now I don't really have a field. I can be part of that. I can be a coach. I can be a broadcaster. I can go different places that I can get my foot in the door based on what I've done, but I have to forge my path. So I'm curious how that looked when you were done playing, and then you said, okay, now what? How did you decide what to do next?
Yeah, well, I actually sought out, the help of the NFLPA when I was done. It was definitely a challenge. I tore my Achilles my second year, and I missed that entire 2003 season. I managed to come back in 2004, 2005 with San Francisco, but I was never the same. So I kind of knew abruptly that my career was coming to an end, and I had to, find something else to do. And so fortunately, I knew that before going in. I chose the University of Notre Dame. I felt like a degree from there would help me be able to move forward if football didn't work out. It's a unique university, and I felt like the degree would put me in some rooms that I would need to be in. And so, I started coaching. I was coaching at Crossroads State University. I was a wide receiver coach. And then during my time there, I went back and got my master's degree, my MBA, and then I started working, corporate jobs. My first job was with the Ford Motor Company, and then also with Tesla. So, I was able to kind of use my education background. I used that, fell back on that, and was able to move forward from the game. But it was definitely a challenge, and I know the feelings you still want to play, and I went through that as well. Really wanting, really feeling like you didn't squeeze all the juice out of the game. But, you got to move on and move forward. And so I just invested that time in my boys and my family.
Well, that's, I think, part of the problem that some of the players have. I joked about Brady, but guys that can go very long. We just had this with Frank Ragnow of the Lions, where he was very beat up. He's known for being a very tough guy. He had a lot of chronic injuries, and I don't think anybody was really surprised, especially in the football world, but even outside, saying, hey, I'm sure his body feels very rough in the off season, and especially during the season, he's not able to heal. We don't blame him for taking the time off. Then he had about a half season off, and he decided he wanted to come back. I mean, I think there is a draw for you guys because you're used to being in that locker room environment, that team environment, and it's hard to replicate that once you get outside of football.
Oh, man, it's so hard. It's so hard. You see a couple guys came back. You see Phillip Rivers coming back at his age. I don't know how old, he's kind of close to my age. I would say maybe 42, 43. But it's definitely hard. It gets quiet. And you kind of, you get used to playing in front of 80,000 plus fans and scoring touchdowns. And that adrenaline rush is like nothing you'll ever experience in life, except maybe the birth of your kids. And so it's very tough to transition. And so you just got to try to find something that you love as much as football, maybe not as much, but close. And so that's the challenge that every football player, really every athlete faces, in that next phase of life. And so it's important, for guys to use whatever resource they can to move forward in a positive way.
Which is probably one of the reasons why you were drawn to that. You used the NFLPA and you saw the value in it. Yeah, Phillip is 44, so you only got 1 year on him. So there's still time.
Right. I wish.
Well, that's what's amazing about, talking about the whole thing about your father playing, and then now both of your sons, one's still in high school, but both your sons playing ball. It's got to be a little surreal because I know you're just slightly older than me, and I'm thinking, how does he have a son that's in the NBA already? But they're getting in pretty young too, because Jaden's not even the youngest guy on the Pistons.
Right. Yeah, he's 23, and I had him at 21. I had him my senior year at Notre Dame, and he actually coincidentally had his son at 21. He's married with 3 kids. But I was fortunate enough to have a son that came out pretty athletic, and he was kind of making a decision himself on which sport he was going to play. But his mother, played in WNBA. She's currently the head basketball coach at Notre Dame, and so he, his passion was basketball, and just feel very blessed, obviously, that he's able to play, and he made it to the highest level, and just want him to continue on and be healthy and happy and have a long career.
Well, like you said, he has a very good athletic profile. He was the son of you and Niall, and the son of a coach, son of 2 very good professional athletes. I actually knew both. It's wild to see him playing. It makes me feel a little bit older because I remember when Niall played for the Shock, and I remember you playing for Detroit Country Day, and now to see your son playing, I'm kind of like, oh man, I'm getting a little old, aren't I?
Right. Yeah, it was some good times, definitely watching Niall play, and Jaden was around her a lot here when she was playing with the Shock, and so that's where he kind of developed his love for the game. He played football starting in 6th grade. We let him play in 6th grade, and then, once he got to high school, he said, I just want to play basketball, and that's where his focus was. But I think, him having parents who play professional sports, it really, kind of developed his love for the game and him wanting to play as well.
I wanted to ask you that. You answered my question before I got a chance to ask it. But Jaden, I look at him and he's a great basketball player. He shouldn't do anything else. But I look at him and I think, man, he would be a very good football player too, with his athletic profile and his speed. I don't see any cornerbacks being able to keep up with him if you got him on the outside.
Yeah, I always tease him. Like I say he looks like a safety, a strong safety, because he's about 200, 205 now, 6'4", 205. So the big kid. I don't know how. I'm 6 foot. Big Niall made sure she took all her vitamins, and that's how he got his size. But he's got an NBA body, and the Pistons are playing great, and so I'm looking forward to seeing how the season plays out as well.
I know this has been a good season so far. I felt bad because obviously we've talked to you about Jaden and I've been rooting for him. Well, mainly because of you, but also because he plays for the Pistons. But it's just been a rough go with the injury thing. Hopefully he can stay healthy, because as long as he stays healthy and gets in the flow, he's going to be in great shape. But I know he's probably feeling it a little bit after kind of the back-to-back injuries. It was like once he kind of got healed up from the first one and was ready to go into camp, then it was determined that he's got to go back under the knife.
Absolutely. It was frustrating for him, having to go back down and take care of his knee. But I think, the Pistons have been great in allowing him to kind of get his feet up under him and get back to normal. And I think, after All-Star break, he's going to be ready to go. But it takes some time. I think people don't understand, one, he broke his leg, and then to come back, for 10 months rehab, and then come back to have another knee issue and have a knee scope and to have another surgery and then be out another 3 weeks when you're trying to get momentum. It's tough. And you're trying to get that momentum during the season. But I think he's playing, and he's been starting the last 3 years. He's coming off the bench now, on a really good team, number one team in the East. And so he's getting his feet up under him, and he's starting to, I think, feel better and feel more comfortable. But it's taking some time. But we're really fortunate. I know he's really strong in his faith, and so am I. And so we're very thankful and grateful that he's able to come back and play the game.
I've been telling people that on my show because it's the idea that it's like he's trying to get on a moving train right now. Everybody had camp to work through, and they got to warm up, and now they've gotten all the reps with each other, so they know exactly where everybody's going to be on the floor. They know where people like the ball, and then Jaden's getting on and going, okay, wait a minute, where do I fit into this? He fits into it. He's just everybody's got to figure out where, because he's a very important part of the future here.
Exactly. And those guys, they spend a lot of time with each other, and I think they have, what I've seen, the most camaraderie in the NBA. They love playing together. And, you've got the core guys. You got Cade, JD, Jaden, Asar and Stu. Those guys have been through the worst of times with losing games. And so, I know they take great pride in turning it around, and now having two winning seasons, currently in another one. And so it's a blessing that they've moved forward, and now they're having some success, and they need to enjoy the success but keep moving forward, and that's what they're doing.
I'm hoping they can put it together. I mean, they're really not getting the respect that a number one team should, in my opinion, especially with Jaden not in full form and probably what's coming here for the season. So I'm excited to follow them down the stretch. We'll be checking in with you about that and hopefully talk more of your career and football. But tell people what you're up to now. Tell the social media stuff, and then also about the trust and the NFLPA stuff, because that's interesting stuff for people to follow.
Absolutely. So my Instagram handle is Javin Hunter 84. Javin Hunter also on LinkedIn, and then also the Players Trust, playerstrust.com is where we have guys go to, the former NFL guys, but you can guys can go there and just check out kind of how the resources that are available to former NFL players and our partnerships and how we help guys move forward. But I appreciate the support, Ryan, and again, thank you for having me on. It was fun.
Definitely. Thanks for coming on. We'll look forward to having you back on, probably both shows, the basketball side and the football side. And and appreciate your time and what you're doing for all the former players and everything. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir, Ryan. Have a great night. Thanks, man.
Thanks. You too. Take care, Javin. Thanks to Javin Hunter. Appreciate him coming on here. Good interview with him in the Declassified series. I found out just before the show that Shayne is going to be able to come on, so he'll be calling us, I believe, from Texas is where he's at. But I'm going to check in with Aaron here quick. I haven't got a chance to talk to him. I'm going to check in with him after the break and see what he's thought of the show so far, and then we'll bring on Shayne after that. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Fans of the show, both shows, may know that we usually try to leave the first segment open. I like to talk to whoever's in studio here with me at the beginning. We didn't get a chance because Daniel had to get on at 7 here, so we haven't gotten a chance to talk to AA Ron in studio. He had an interesting take that I want to talk to him about. We had that Lions segment, and we talked about the OC hire, and I thought Aaron, you brought up a good point about kind of that Campbell needs to get back to the kind of controlling the team as a whole, because you kind of, it seems like you maybe thought that he jumped into the offensive coordinator role a little quickly last season with Morton. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I know, like, usually with head coaches, they lean one way or another. They're either like a defensive guy or they're an offensive guy. And I think sometimes they have too much of an input when it comes to the offense, and then they overtake. And I kind of felt that was kind of the same way with Dan Campbell. And it's not like he didn't know Morton at all, because he was on the staff prior to, and then just all of a sudden, middle of the season, I'm taking over. He didn't say he wasn't doing a bad job. I mean, obviously he was trying to keep it respectful, but yeah, it felt like you can kind of read between the lines. He didn't like something that was happening, and he wanted just to take control. And normally that's fine as long as like with Sean Payton, at least for the Denver Broncos. He's an offensive guy, so he calls the plays. You know, we don't know if they even have an OC, but it's like if you're going to do that, at least do that as opposed to having an OC then taking over middle of the season.
It's funny that you bring up Peyton, because he now has Morton back on his staff. That's where he came from, and that's where Campbell found him. They both have New Orleans connections there. He's connected with Peyton from his past, so that was kind of the overlap. But I do think, because that's why I wanted to get your perspective on it. You are a coach yourself at the high school level, and yeah, everybody's got a role. And when you overload one of the roles, that was my criticism more from that side of things. With I understand the criticism of taking the OC job over and maybe not giving Morton enough time, but it also overloads Campbell's docket too, because he's got to manage all the things that are going on with the team, and then now he's got to call plays. Peyton goes into the year, to your point, planning on calling the plays. He knows that's part of his plan to figure that out. I don't remember what week it was, week 7 or whatever, and say, hey, I'm calling plays now. That's going to upset the balance. Even if you still have Morton on the team doing something and all those offensive coaches, it's going to be a lot to put on Campbell, who's already kind of the CEO, quote unquote, of that organization.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, because it's like with Shepard being a new defensive coordinator too, where maybe there could be some help there. And obviously Dan Campbell's an offensive guy, but as a head coach, you kind of help on both sides of the ball. So if you're going to be the main play caller on offense or defense, you better hope that whoever's the opposite, the OC or the DC, is someone who's veteran enough that, like, essentially another head coach. You know, it's like, I hate saying it's like the offense and the defense, but to a degree it is that way. And I feel like with Shepard being new, I mean, obviously he did a great job considering, you know, having all those injuries in the secondary, and he was still able to be pretty good. I honestly liked him better than Aaron Glenn personally. And he did a pretty good job. I just like to see, you know, you assign guys to roles, and do that middle of the season just kind of gave at least me it was kind of a bad look for Dan Campbell.
I always say this about even my own life. You know, we all only have 24 hours in a day, and you can try to use it as efficiently as you want, but you still only have that same amount of time. So then if your time is pretty full to begin with, and then you're adding that major task on it, that gets condensed. You only have 3 hours, 4 hours in an NFL game. So now that gets condensed in that game, and you're not able, to your point, Aaron, you're not able to advise Shepard the way you want, because then you're worried about installing something for the next drive, or maybe you're not paying attention to what happens because you're worried about that piece. So it's a good point, and I think hopefully Petzing will take that role back over, and we've seen that he can let somebody do that. He didn't let Lynn do it for very long, the first iteration. Then he let Johnson do it and felt confident in him. So hopefully Petzing can be more like Johnson than Lynn and Morton in these categories here. But it's worth a discussion. I'm glad we talked about that. But we'll bring Shayne into the discussion here next. We'll take a quick break and bring him on and talk some playoff picture and maybe some lines with him. So stick with us. You're listening to Shayne Graham's Extra Points on Jethro FM. Speaking of Shayne Graham, he's joining us live here, remote from, I think, Texas here, if I've got his travel schedule correct. So I'm glad I'm excited you're going to be back in studio with us, but I am glad you're avoiding this weather up here, Shayne.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've already heard that they're canceling flights into and out of Dallas over the next couple days.
Oh, okay. So now you're maybe extending your stay down there.
Well, I'm planned on being here through Sunday, so maybe I get the end of it. Maybe I don't know. I can't imagine it gets that bad, but I've also been down here for an ice storm before, and I think we've seen some. There was a Thanksgiving Day game where Leon Lett's famous, little field goal slide thing that he did was during an ice storm. So they get weather down here. It's just interesting because I always think of Texas as being hot.
And when they do get the weather, because we know this, obviously you aren't an original Michigander, but you're a Michigander now and getting used to the weather, I'm sure. But when you do get it in those southern regions, it's much harder to deal with because they don't have the infrastructure. They don't know what to do with it. So 10% of what we get up here basically breaks everything down if it's in a region that's not used to it.
And that's what I think it really is I don't think they have the snow plows all over the place. Two, I don't think they have all the subcontractors that do some of the work for the Department of Transportation. And I don't think they have the salt bays of just built up salt to put out on the roads either, like we kind of have set up there in Michigan.
I saw that when I was in D.C. because I was there for, I think, the biggest storm they ever had or something like that. And it just shut the whole city down. And I remember running around town and picking friends up. They'd be calling me and they'd be like, how are you driving in this? I'm like, this is normal weather for where I'm from. I'm used to this. So you're a transplant, so you've had to get used to it. But I'm glad you've been at least in the warmer weather. I'm curious about some of your thoughts over I don't know how much you've been able to keep up with the playoffs, both on the college and the NFL side. But as you know, I was in the warm weather for a moment to see Miami and Indiana live. That was great seeing my alma mater there. There were some different things that happened. I keep, as you know, I keep thinking of you with the different kicking things, and there were a lot of kicking events in that game. You had a block punt at about the 5. I felt bad for that Miami kicker because I was thinking about that as we're set to kind of preview the playoffs, and the kickers are going to be important here for this last 4 teams in the respective championships, AFC and NFC and the NFL. And the former Miami kicker is factoring in. The guy that replaced him struggled in the college football playoff, and I felt bad because he put another one off the wrong side of the post, and then Indiana was able to clang one in, and that ended up kind of being the difference in the game. Both of those, they go the opposite way, and that game's tied. Absolutely.
I hate to see it, any specialist really go through something like that. But I'll admit I was pulling for Indiana. But, seeing what someone goes through, what is their life going to be like for the next couple weeks? And that can be a tough thing for someone because you are recognized on campus now, and everyone's looking at you a certain way, and that can be tough. But also, seeing, Indiana blocking a punt, they schemed it up perfect. They knew where the punter was going to be rolling out to. They knew where to get to block the ball. And, a block punt is one of the most telling stats in college football, but a block punt for a touchdown is that's over 100 yards of hidden yardage is the term that we use, hidden yardage. And when you get not only the hidden yardage, but you get scoring position or a touchdown out of it, it is almost insurmountable to come back from that.
I'm glad you brought that up because I know you've talked about that on the show before, and that was a perfect example, really, because of where it was on the field, the point in the game. I know one of the statistical models on ESPN that basically models out, hey, here's the likelihood to win this game, win probability based on all of the events of the game. Miami was at, under that particular model, an 85% chance to win the game. Indiana was 15. So to your point about the hidden yardage, if you're a 15% chance of winning, you have to hit a couple plays like that huge swing of that punt block for an immediate touchdown to win a game that you're going to win, once or twice out of 10 times.
Yes. Yeah. And plays like that are such a huge swing. And there's also a thing called MO that is a real thing, momentum. And that's whether you get the hidden yardage or not. But then you have the psychological aspect of such a big moment that can just deflate one team. Whether a touchdown is scored or not, it's still deflating.
Exactly. And that was clearly something that Indiana was very good at all season, because they had a coach that was very steady, had a lot of confidence in his schemes and in his plays and in his players, rightfully so, because they went all the way with those schemes. And I mean, even watching him down the stretch with the way he was using the timeouts and the different ways he was manipulating the game, it was fun to watch, and not just because it was my team and my alma mater, but it was just a great coaching job. But yeah, perfect example of how those special teams factor in. I want to go back to the Miami kicker for a minute, because we were talking about that a little bit with the Indiana side of things, because when we interviewed Daniel Flick of IU on SI for the first segment, he talked about the Indiana players were basically trying to treat this as found money. Hey, we made it this far. Of course we want to win this game, but we're not going to be ashamed if we lose. Miami should be in that same spot. They were questioned whether or not they should have made it into the college football playoff as a whole, and they made it very far. And it doesn't come down to that one kick or anything else, because they still had a chance to win it at the end, aside from kicking. And then if they had made that touchdown at the end and tied the game, and Beck was able to drive him down, then that guy, then the kicker, Carter, I think his name is Carter Davis, he would have been able to kick the extra point to potentially win the game.
Yeah. And, and I think he would have made it if he had the opportunity. But, that's what makes championship games fun to watch. It's over the years, we've been kind of subject to watching games where you're like, how is this team on the field with this team? And it was fun to see a game actually have where plays mattered versus you're already beyond the point of knowing that a team can come back, and nobody wants to watch anymore after that. So, even if you're a fan of either team, I think when you get that type of situation, it makes it just more fun to watch, because it pumps everyone's adrenaline, and they might not even have a dog in the race, but they start to kind of subconsciously maybe pull for a certain team. For me, I know when I'm watching a game and I give 0 ounces of care to either team, I always want the team that's coming back from behind to win. And when you get to watch that, it's just more exciting. That being said, I still wanted Indiana to win.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. That was part of this process that was kind of strange. Indiana was the favorite. They blew out the last 2 teams that they played. They blew out Oregon and Alabama, and they were the overwhelming favorite in the game. I did think 8.5 was kind of a big line, and it ended up being a little bit too hefty. But they also didn't have the feel of a classic overdog. They still felt like an underdog with their story, and they were going into Miami's home stadium against a team that historically is very successful. Yes, maybe they've struggled a little bit in recent years, but that's a dynasty type program against the school that, as of the beginning of the season, thankfully not the end because they were winning so much this year, was the losingest program in Division I college football history.
I mean, when I was coaching at Michigan State, playing football at University of Indiana, playing a game there, it was not considered a big deal. I mean, it was like, oh, we're here at a basketball school about to watch some football. And I don't think a whole lot of places really took them serious. So to see them where they are now, I think it's a story that made a lot of people feel good, but also presented a new model for developing players with a certain type of what we talked about another time on another show was culture within the team, and having a culture built on team unity and kind of cohesion versus me type atmosphere.
Exactly. That's so important. We've seen it kind of at the Lions level too, where they go more with the culture over kind of the individual talent, and that's clearly what Indiana did. I mean, we saw. I've talked about it a few times on the show, but we've seen it in the different graphics that they had in the semifinals for the college football playoff. Indiana had 0 5-star recruits, initial 5-star recruits, and then only 7 4-star recruits. All those other teams had 5-star recruits, and I believe the next lowest number was somewhere in the 30s for 4-star recruits. So that just shows you the kind of the starting point versus where they eventually got, because like you said, that was a team that was full of very talented players and guys that maximized their talent, and a coaching staff that maximized their talent, plus a guy that's likely set to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So it's not just college players too. I'm excited to see what Fernando Mendoza, if he does indeed get picked, which is the odds-on favorite to be picked by the Raiders. There's a lot of process to go through, but I don't think you could really have a better quarterback mentor than somebody that you used to play with that now is a part owner of the Raiders here. Mendoza and Brady seems like a perfect combination.
It would be a perfect combination. But back to the point about all the 5 stars and 4 stars and 3 stars and all of that, I heard a great quote from Nick Saban the other day, and he said, "How do we judge these guys coming out of high school, and we base it on these stars that they're given? But the stars are not given by the coaches. The stars are given by all these independent people that are not a part of a true evaluation system of actual coaches." And he said, "We're putting all these faith in people that don't know their butt from a handful of sand." And he's right, because he talks about all these 5 stars that make it through and potentially get to the NFL. But then you see guys that are 3 stars that are first-round draft picks. Now, yeah, we sometimes see guys that kind of go through the whole system as superstars from day one. But how do you put a value on a guy when you're being evaluated by guys that are simply just trying to put out almost a media report? I hate to say it, but I mean, look at J.J. Watt coming out of high school. He went to Central Michigan, transferred to Wisconsin, became one of the biggest names in defensive football in the NFL, and was nothing out of high school. And it's just funny how you see that we lose track of guys that mature and develop. I mean, let's think about going from the age of 18 to 22 in our lives and what we actually learned and figured out during that time, and what some of us have taken even longer than that to figure out. So I think it's really hard to just say that because a team has all these 5 stars. I mean, look at Texas A&M a few years ago. They had more 5 stars than I think a couple recruiting classes, top 10 had all together combined, but they still couldn't win a championship. And it just goes to show that, like, the quote unquote talent level of those 5 stars isn't always evaluated at the right way that a coach truly wants to have someone that they can mold and develop.
A lot of great points in there. Part of me wants to go down the path of the phrase of that you had from Saban, but I'm not going to take us down that path. It's probably dangerous. But go ahead, Shayne.
I was just going to say, I've heard it spoken in other words, but I'm trying to be clean.
Yeah, I liked how you did that. So that's why I say that's the first one I wanted to go down. But we'll go down the second and third pass. But there's a lot of great information in there, and I think a lot of it kind of you explained it well as far as the 18 to 22 thing. I mean, as adults that are in our 40s, we understand kind of the circles of influence theory and concept that you are kind of who you're around. You're a combination of the 5 people that you're around the most, whatever you want to apply there. But even if you're a very independent, a forward-thinking, driven person, you're going to inherently be influenced by those around you. And when you're an 18-year-old, you're very impressionable, and you're going to be impressionable to a coaching figure, a mentor figure. And so that's why there can be such compound effects from 18 to 22, where you say, because your point about the rankings is great too. It's not really, it's somebody's opinion. It's nothing more than that. It might be, and it's an aggregation of somebody's opinion, which in some ways are worse, because then they're just going off of each other. That's what happens in the draft too. But you have these kids that, I think that's why Indiana, now they're one of the leaders in the transfer portal, and they have the re-ranking of the stars for the guys in the transfer portal. That's at least a little bit more information, because you're ranking guys that have already played in college, and you're seeing kind of what they are now. Oh, now they're more viewed as a 4-star. It's still an opinion. It's still a guide. But like you said, you're gathering more information, and yeah, you're taking on this kid that's 18 and very impressionable, so it matters what you do with him at that point and how you lead him and the system you put him in, because you put that same kid in 2 different systems and it's going to be 2 entirely different results.
Yeah, exactly. And there's even a factor that plays in there, and this is why, like, even for specialists being recruited out of high school, a lot of guys are going for that grad transfer or that guy that's already battle tested. And you've also got to deal with one other thing. They've dealt with at least the first year away from mom and dad. They've dealt with that first year of figuring out time management and figuring out how to be somewhat of an adult. I hesitate to say being an adult, because I promise you I was not a very good adult as a freshman in college. But that whole first and second year of college and figuring out how to do your own laundry, stock your own pantry, manage your homework, manage your practice time, manage your working out, manage your sleep, manage your classes. All those things you're learning to manage can be a big struggle for some people. And sometimes that kid right out of high school can be a wild card. And sometimes coaches are going to be like, you know what? This guy's already proven himself. He's already had that year or 2 away from mom and dad. And that can be a really big factor. And I think that's actually changed the landscape more so than people think, not just the talent level, but that maturity of being away from home for at least a year or 2.
It's a great point, and you talk about that a lot as far as the preparation and knowing all the things off the field, because that's the part that gets you prepared when you're on the field too. It gets you better at preparing for your life on and off the field, and that's why some of the things that you're doing with your coaching school and coaching program help with some of these rankings and things, because it's at least more of an educated system of saying, hey, I'm factoring a lot of these things in, and I have a more educated eye than these recruiters and rankers and folks that are just in the media and ranking people according to really some things that don't factor in a large part of the process. So great stuff. I'm glad you could join us and talk about this, because that I think we're going to be talking a lot more about these different parts in the process, because we've talked about it in pieces with the college football season, but there are so many of these anomalies in college football that kind of need to be cleared up a little bit, that have just been, they've stood the test of time as far as that star ranking system has been there forever, but it's not necessarily a good system. It's just the system we're using currently. And that's a big difference. Doing something because we've always done it isn't always the best reason to do something. So I'm excited to cover these kinds of subjects more in depth as we go further into the season here. Off-season.
Absolutely.
So, but we appreciate you joining the show, and we'll look forward to having you back in studio next week here. And I hope the travel process goes well for you back from the slightly warmer temperature that you're in to our colder climate here.
Yes, absolutely. And hopefully it doesn't get too much of a gridlock here, but I think we're all kind of headquartered at the Star. So I don't think I need to do much driving until this is over. or at least be in a car until it's over. But I sat on the runway for 2 hours this morning because they had to de-ice the plane and scrape the runway. So who knows what it'll be when I get back.
Yikes. Yeah. Well, stay safe down there and have a safe trip back. And we'll look forward to having you back in studio next Thursday here.
You got it.
Thanks, Shayne. Talk to you soon.